Good afternoon. We are privileged today to have in our Annenberg colloquium Pekka Himanen, who is going to present his ideas on the hacker ethic related to different domains of society, including business, probably not only business. Let me just a few words for those of you who have not followed his project story in the recent years. I would say, well, first of all, what he is currently doing. Pekka is, as his point, he's director of the Berkeley Center for the Information Society. That is a research center at the University of California, Berkeley, that brings together computer scientists and social scientists on different cutting-edge issues of the interaction between technology and society. He is also a senior researcher at the Helsinki Institute of Information Society, which is also a joint venture between computer science and social science on cutting-edge issues of interaction between technology and society. And to some extent, this reflects his training, because he is both a philosopher and a computer scientist. Of course, his studies are way behind him, because he obtained his PhD at the University of Helsinki when he was 20. And by the way, a little footnote, this is going to be our new standard for our Annenberg students. You are cut off. So, Pekka is probably best known because of his book, The Hacker Ethic and the Spirit of the Information Age, that was published by Random House in 2001, and at last count has been translated in these 2 years into 18 languages, the last two being Indonesian, and what is the other one? And Turkish. It's running out of languages to be translated to, and it's a bestseller, including in this country. The main themes of the book, of course, are related to what his talk is going to be, although he certainly will present additional research. He's currently working on comparative models of information society. He is running a comparative study of Finland, Silicon Valley, Singapore, China, Japan, to see how information society manifests itself in different formats and in different cultures. And I would also add one observation, that as all creators, he is very difficult to define, and one in a school that has some connection to the world of cinema, theater, entertainment, television. It's worthwhile to mention that there's some fascination in Finland about his personality. And there was a theater play about him a few years ago, and for some reason, something that is striking in this, because the theater play was translated into English and was shown in the London theater last year, I believe, 2 years ago. So anyway, it's this complexity that he brings with him to our school, and I hope that even briefly we can have a productive intellectual interaction. Thank you.
Well, I'm very glad to be here discussing the hacker ethic, its relationship to the larger culture of the information age. I just want to define what I mean by a hacker, because this is creating a lot of confusion nowadays. When I talk about hackers, I don't mean computer criminals, people who break into systems or write viruses, but I mean what the word originally meant in the 60s, which was enthusiastic programmers who wanted to join their forces with other programmers to create software. And it hackers in this sense, not the computer criminals that I will be talking about. And there is this original hacker ethic that was combining these people. It was based on two things. One was that you are a hacker if you have a passionate relationship to your work. And secondly, you want to build things together with other hackers. So you want to belong to a community where you share openly your creations for others to use, test, and to develop further. And your main reward is to get recognition for your good contributions from that community. And this is actually the way much of the foundation of the information age was built. The internet, the World Wide Web, things like the Linux operating system and a lot of other things were actually not developed by corporations or governments, but by individuals who just were mostly students who started to play with new ideas. They were enthusiastic about this new possibility, then announced the idea to others later on the net, and then everyone put what they could add to the system. And this is how the internet developed, how the World Wide Web developed after Tim Berners-Lee started it in Switzerland, and how the Linux operating system developed, which now runs the largest part of the web. Linus Torvalds was the creator of this system when he was a 21-year-old student at the University of Helsinki, and he just announced this idea, and gradually hundreds and now thousands of people are joining him in the development. I was first impressed by the hacker movement because it has created so big achievements, the net itself. And later, however, I became even more interested in understanding if there is something about the hacker ethic that applies to the information age more generally. If the hacker ethic actually be understood as a new alternative work ethic for the information or creative information work. And I will propose that it is linked to our information economy in three ways. And if one wants, one can also think of or use, instead of the phrase hacker ethic, phrase creative work ethic or innovation work ethic for the same idea, if the word hacker feels too awkward. There are three things that make this ethic relevant and that contrast the information economy to the industrial economy and its dominant work ethic, what was Max Weber's Protestant work ethic, that thought that you should regard work as your duty in which you do the given part and in which suffering is even a bit noble. This was the idea of the Protestant ethic, and it also spread far more widely than the Protestant countries, so it actually has also nothing to do with the Protestant or Christian religion. The three things are related to what Manuel Castells has showed about the information economy. First, in the information economy, growth is more and more based on innovation. So the information economy is really about growth based on innovation, and this means that creative work becomes more and more the core of our economic activity. That's the Richard Florida argument about the creative class as becoming the center of our economy. It's becoming a bigger and bigger group in the advanced economies in the world. It doesn't mean that everyone is now part of the creative class or hacker, but it means that a larger and larger group is and that it is the dominant group that is directing the development. So it's not just the software programmers, it's all kinds of engineers and researchers and journalists or designers or all kind of media people, managers and so on. So there is this group of people whose work is more and more about innovation and creativity. And secondly, there is this sense that networks of innovators are becoming the actor of the economy. So networks make the innovations in the global competition. One innovator cannot succeed for a long time, but one has to join with other innovators, and that's why companies are also transforming into network enterprises that are organized as networks. So people work in networks of action teams, or companies are internally consisting of relatively autonomous units that network together for the changing needs of projects, and also externally companies network with other companies to keep up the leading innovation. And then thirdly, there is the flexible time in the information economy, a new, more flexible relationship to time, because of projects are becoming the basis and basic units of work in the economy. And this means that work is more and more defined by results, and then it gives a freer relationship to time for the workers to decide how they achieve these results. So these are the three developments in the economy. Now coming back to the hacker ethic, I want to relate the hacker ethic to each of these three dimensions. First, growth based on innovation. When we think about an economy where growth is based more and more on innovation, then Protestant ethic becomes outdated. It worked very well in the industrial economy, where a lot of work was routine work, which was very uninteresting in itself. So it made a lot of sense to teach the people that they should regard their work only as a duty in which you do what you are commanded. And also the result of work was very directly the function of the used time. But in the information economy, where the success or growth depends on being able to invite creativity, the Protestant ethic turns against itself also in the economic sense. People who are just doing what they are told and regarding their work as a duty don't make the kind of courageous, innovative thinking that companies now need. The industrial economy developed a management culture based on supervision, but the information economy needs the hacker attitude of focusing on results and inviting creativity. This is the difference between two work cultures that always come to my mind. One occasion when I was in India, there was a very everyday situation where I got a good reminder of this difference between the culture of supervision of the industrial thinking and the culture of focusing on results. In India, I had a lot of time to observe the daily life, and I became very interested in the Indian street cleaners, because although they were cleaning the streets from morning till night every day of the week, the streets didn't become any cleaner. And I became very, very intrigued by this, and then I gradually became upset about it. How can it be that they don't get any cleaner? And then I complained about this to my Indian colleague, that how can it be that the bosses are not paying attention to this situation, and then he answered that now you have looked at this situation from a different, from a wrong perspective. You have mistakenly assumed that the task of the Indian street cleaner is to clean streets, and which I admitted that this was my mistake. To which he continued that the actual task of the Indian street cleaner is not to clean streets, but to exist impeccably in the capacity of a street cleaner. And if you exist impeccably in the capacity of a street cleaner, you have fulfilled your task in this culture. When I returned first to Finland and then to California, and started to observe that it is so different in our world. First in the university, I started to think that it is really the task of the students to learn. It's that universities try to offer more and more interesting opportunities to learn for people. And as we know, generally universities are not at all interested in students, from which I came to the conclusion that even in our cultures, the task of the student is to exist impeccably in the capacity of a student. And when you have existed long enough in this capacity, you are ready to exist impeccably in the capacity of a worker. But what is important here is this difference between two cultures, the culture of supervision and the culture of focusing on results and as it's most important from focusing on enticing creativity. And this change is coming with the rise of the information economy, because creativity and innovation is really the source of all success in it. So if you think about it from the company perspective, there is a strong competition about how to attract the best talent, how to keep the best talent, and how to best use the capacity of the best talent. And this is why more and more companies in different fields are introducing a new work culture that actually is very much based on the idea of the hacker idea of creative work, passionate creative relationship to work, and therefore I think we can say that there's a significant shift in the economy from the old industrial Protestant ethic, and that is why I call it the hacker work ethic. Secondly, I mentioned that an important feature of the information economy is that networks make the innovations, and here again it's different from the industrial time, where a lot of work was actually isolated in terms of the actual process from other workers. But now all critical work is done by networks of people interacting with each other. And this again goes to the hacker model of doing things, because the hacker model is totally based on the idea of having a creative passion networked together. And so the hacker open development model is really about people who joining their forces to use best and to develop further what others have developed. And this has also proved to be very powerful in other fields of life than software. And I think what we have here is two very important psychological factors. One is that we think about psychological theories about when people are at their best, or when people feel that they have an especially strong motivation to do something. There are two things that are repeated in different psychological theories. One is that when you feel that you have a self-actualizing relationship to work, you feel that you are using your capabilities in the work, and that creates enthusiasm, because that's when the person feels that the person has kind of a connection to one's source of energy. But the second factor is that when there is a community of people where people can feel that they are part of a larger we that shares the same passion, the same interest, and where they can even be hear or see with a capital letter through the recognition that they receive from the others in that community. And this possibility of being part of the we and being he or she with a capital letter is something that has been the only motivating factor in the open source movement, because they have not received any money for developing the internet or the World Wide Web or the Linux operating system. So, and this is also very close to what motivates a lot of researchers or artists, that this possibility of combining creative passion with belonging to a community of the like-minded and getting recognition. And this is what is becoming more and more discussed in the companies in the world now, because they also realize that their ability to succeed in the competition will depend on what kind of networks of innovation they are able to form. So in the sense, what kind of creative community they are able to form. And I have talked with many companies, and for example, Nokia, the mobile phone company, has totally transformed its management culture and work culture through these principles of managing a creative passion and it has the manager's first order task to set ambitious goals that generate shared enthusiasm. So that's what the hacker ethic in practice means. And I would call it the challenge of building an enriching community instead of an impoverishing community. And this is a question of if people in companies feel that they are more because of the community that they belong to, because of the interactions that they have in that community. This is what people in the open source movement feel. Or if they feel that they are less because of that community and because of the interaction with other people, which is the dangerous part for companies to get to in the information economy, because then it's the dying part. And still, I think that many companies are very far compared to the open source movement in building networks of innovation that are enriching for the people. It's not a common attitude. If I think about the Finnish case and the Finnish company world especially, I think it's very, very far. Maybe I can mention just as an everyday situation that I had recently in a Finnish restaurant about this enriching versus impoverishing interaction. I went to this restaurant, and it's important to remember that the Finnish service culture is very different from the American one. In Finland, the customer is not always right. In Finland, at best, the customer is sometimes not totally wrong. So I went to this restaurant thinking about my ideas about the hacker ethic, and then I asked, could I have the menu, please, to which the answer was, have you come here to give me a hard time, or do you take a beer? So if you think about our environment from the network of interaction viewpoint, I think that our business world is really far away from the level that the hacker movement has achieved. And I would say that if we want to underline some main aspects that are different from the industrial age, it is really the role of creativity and the role of human interaction in the new economy, and there's a lot of things to do in these respects. The last topic that I wanted to discuss was the third dimension of the information economy, the flexible relationship to time. And here the question is more complicated. On the one hand, I said that there is this more flexible relationship to time forming in the economy, and that's partly because of IT that makes a freer relation to time and place possible, and makes individual rhythms of work possible, and it's also related to the project as the main unit in how things are organized in companies. But that's only one part of the hacker way of thinking about time, or the hacker relationship to time. The hackers have of course also worked in the rhythm of creativity, so they have the typical image of a hacker is that he or she programs when one wakes up sometime in the afternoon and then continues or late in the night, and then may take another day with a different rhythm of creativity and so on. But this is only one part of the hacker ethic relationship to time, flexibility. The other and as important is a kind of more relaxed relationship to time than in the industrial age. If you think about some of the most famous hackers in the world, like Linus Torvalds, they have a very interesting way of taking advantage of IT in organizing a more balanced combination of work and other life. So you can take a day off or more easily, or have a rhythm of the day where you can organize things not only based on the needs of the work but also on the needs of your other life. So, for example, Linus is one of the laziest people that I know, and he's also one of the most family-centered people that I know. And I know many other hackers with the same kind of an attitude to time and technology, which is that basically technology is meant to give us a more human relationship to time. But there's a paradox about the information economy as we see it now, that it is the most work-centered culture in history. So there hasn't been anything like this ever. And always we hear that technology is freeing us and giving us a freer relationship to time. But so far it just has meant that work has kind of coming to dominate life more and more. There's a great paradox in the information economy currently, which is that we are the technologically and economically most developed time in the world history, Yet for people in practice, their days consist of a survival struggle, trying to get through all the appointments and project deadlines of the day. So what we are actually seeing, if you look at statistics, we are seeing the most stressing working environment in history. People are exhausting themselves with work. If I look at the European figures, I just came or saw a figure comparing 1970 and 2000, and the figure was that in 1970, 1 in 4 workers said that they feel occasionally overexhausted by their work. And nowadays it's 2/3 of workers that say that they feel they are overexhausted by work, with this technological development meant to help and lighten our life. The striking statistics is also that people are so stressed that in some countries 40% of the adult population say that they have sleeping problems at least 3 nights a week, and 10 to 15% are chronically sleepless. We can wonder how this can come with the freer relationship to time, and also we could sometime calculate what this costs to society and companies through kind of heart and stomach diseases and so on. So we are currently seeing a work-centered culture that is having a serious impact on our life and on our quality of life. That is not limited in any way to the workday that is stressful and so on. The work-centeredness has reached a level where it is changing what we are in general. First, work-centeredness means that we develop in ourselves dimensions that are relevant to work and don't develop or much other dimensions. So we have a world of rationally trimmed, kind of optimally goal-oriented individualists who don't have so much kind of playfulness or spontaneity in life or connection to other people in life. Secondly, the leisure time can become one of 2 alternatives, and it's becoming one of 2 alternatives more and more based on studies. One is that leisure time becomes subordinated to work totally. So the leisure time leaves only the function of kind of recharging the battery of the person. So when people go now to home or kind of leaving the work behind in an energy-saving mode, they kind of set themselves on the coach, the recharging station at home, and then the rest of the family can kind of follow this recharging process, which is as interesting as looking at the mobile phones when they are recharging. There are these bars growing on mobile phones, kind of that my spouse has now 2 bars. It has also been well ironized that what has resulted is that subordinated leisure time means that families don't have any energy to do anything together, but they just watch together, mute, go on TV, fathers and mothers and children talk energetically to each other. This is another way that work-centeredness is forming our information economy currently, and the last form is that structures of work are conquering also our leisure time. So when everything is optimized in the work day, you cannot just be in your leisure time either. You have to be optimally. So if you want to relax, you have to go to a relaxation course or something. And also it means that the structures of the working day, the scheduling idea, the idea of life consisting of appointments and projects takes also the leisure time. The extreme is a quite typical evening in Silicon Valley nowadays, based on some time use surveys. It goes like this, as an example of work-centeredness and structures of work conquering leisure time. 5:30 to 5:45 take child to sports. 5:45 to 6:30 gym. 6:30 to 7:20 therapy. 7:20 to 8 pick up child, make food and eat. 8 to 11 watch television with the family. 11 to 11:30 put child to bed and a conversation moment with the spouse. And 11:30 to 11:40 other attention paid to spouse sometimes. The question that I want to raise, which is short or thinking about the relationship to time in our current information economy, is that this doesn't sound very sustainable in the long run. I mean, even from the economic viewpoint, you cannot sustain your creativity if you become too narrow as a person, and if you don't have any other life than your work. But secondly, it's not much of life either, and it's very different from the original Socratic idea of why we are developing technology, which is that it should give us a genuinely clear relationship to time, and not just the rhythm of time in work, but also the rhythm of time generally, how we can combine in a more balanced way the work and other life. And so I want to end with the other viewpoint that if we ask if this life at best that we are at our best in work and at our worst in home, I think the answer is not really, and that probably when we have energy also to be at our best at home, that's life is at its best, and it shows positively in everything, including work. And I think we have still a way to go from the current optimization of time, which is inherited from Protestant Ethic, to the sustainable way of thinking about time in the information economy. Thank you.
Okay, we have now, I asked Pekka to be as brief as possible so that we could have really quality time for discussion. Larry?
In listening to your discussion initially about the sort of creative, sort of high creative period of the early, this sort of hacker period, what it reminded me of was less the Protestant sort of favors sort of early capitalism period than those odd moments that occur of sort of Renaissance creativity. Thinking, say, 15th century Florence, the turn of the 19th, 20th century Paris, and other eras in which, to some extent, when you look back at them, there was an extraordinary amount of creativity going on with much of the same properties that you're describing, which is networks of people, frequently but not always young, working outside of routine structures. but very much at the as a sort of at the forefront of some kind of radical innovation, and very much oriented towards sharing and developing, sort of together, whether it's the avant-garde in art or other periods. One of the striking things about that, though, is that they never last very long. Is that there are these periods, and then it's always a very interesting question. And economists have thought about it, and sociologists, other people even. What is it that makes this sort of come together? But why doesn't it last? And part of the answer, of course, is it becomes conventionalized, it becomes successful. Careers begin to separate people, as some of them are more successful than others. And I suppose I'm interested in whether some of that might be another way of thinking about this trajectory, and whether it's possible to sustain that kind of sort of heated innovation for very long under any. I mean, are there any examples of that being maintained?
Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting point, and I also think that the hacker ethic, in a strict sense, is not totally new. I mean that there have been groups of people in history, like scientists and artists, with a very same kind of an attitude, and then special periods in history when this attitude has been especially strong. But I think that there is also something really different about the information age and information economy that makes this relevant in a new way, which is that in history these groups of people have been quite marginal from the viewpoint of the whole economy. It has been a very small group of people, but if you look at our economy now, there are two things. One is that Richard Florida, for example, shows, but many others also, that more than 1/3 of workers already belong to the creative class, so they are doing creative work. And secondly, more and more the raw material of our economy is knowledge, and creating knowledge or creating information, and this kind of links it structurally to the core of what is happening in the economy. And therefore, though there are predecessors of this attitude in history, it's only now possible to talk about the change of the dominant work culture.
Maybe, but it seems to me that after having described the sort of golden age of self-actualizing creativity, what you're then describing is its routinization and its, sort of becoming less like that as it becomes a larger part of the economy. It becomes bureaucratized. It becomes sort of made into a job rather than an avocation or whatever, a creative fashion. So that it's not clear to me, despite Richard Florida's data or tables, she was trying to assemble it, that in fact it does work generalized onto a larger category from a relatively small group of interacting, mutually energizing creators, which is the model that one finds in other circumstances. I mean, it would be nice to believe, but I think your story is that one should be skeptical.
Yes, well, it's possible that it also becomes partly more routine-like, but I wouldn't say that we have now seen most of the creativity that there was to see in the information age, that it was the late 90s and the internet evolution. But there is actually a lot of innovative drive going on in different fields of life, and even if it stops at 1/3 of workers who are potentially creative workers, I think it is already a very significant change to how things were in the industrial time.
You seem to be equating the bottom 1/3 of this creative class with the most innovative people in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s in the information age. And I subscribe to your point of view that it becomes routinized. Couldn't we look at, for example, some endeavors like theoretical physics or mathematics where a small group of people continue to innovate over long periods of time? Not because of economic reasons, usually because of passion, calling, whatever you'd call it. And the society absorbs those kind of concepts. So we have all sorts of scientists now who have PhDs and do science. That is to say, it's become an industry. You can do science in a biology, pharmaceutical company. It's not the same as being new. And so I'm not convinced that we haven't seen this kind of phenomenon before, and we're not sort of blurring the distinction. I think it was, well, anyway, I'll stop there.
Well, I think that the three dimensions, structural features of the economy, the role of innovation, the role of networking, and the flexible relationship to time are resulting in a quite clear change. I'm not saying that all of these people in the group of innovators are innovative with the same extent. So there is probably a smaller group that is innovative in the strict sense of the hacker ethic. And if you think about the relationship between the hacker ethic and the information economy, conceptually, I'm not equating the hacker ethic with what exists currently in our information economy. I'm just saying that this is kind of proposing a way of thinking that is spreading slowly in our economy because of what the role of innovation is increasingly is in our time.
You use the word in your book, joyful, especially to describe MIT in the early 60s. It's absolutely true. We had a lot of fun. It was in tremendous pressure, but a lot of fun. Is that something which is essential, that if that goes out, the rest of the hacker ethic starts to fall apart? You go back to use your dichotomy, back to Friday instead of Sunday?
Yeah. So I think that this is also the kind of best scenario, and so at best creative work can be joyful, but I wouldn't say that it must be typically it's so, and actually, of course, all big creative works require periods that are much less satisfying in themselves, but maybe the fact that you are still using your creative potential, you are kind of actualizing something that is in you, who gives a different tone even to the less joyful part. So my best way of thinking about this is that it's not and that's why I didn't use it now. It is not something that is necessary part of the idea.
Yes, a comment and a question, if I may. The comment has to do with Konrad Lorenz, about 30 years ago, published a book, Civilized Man's 8 Deadly Sins. And one of those was that technology is putting us in a position that we no longer have time for the truly human facility of mental reflection. Now, I think from what you said, you tend to agree with that, but I think therefore it might be that what people could detect that this was happening due to technology before, let's call it what we now recognize as the true information age has come into full throttle. Or maybe that was the early recognition that was an information age phenomenon that was already occurring. You might look at Lorenz's book with my suggestion. The question, though, is another historical one on the Protestant work ethic, and you related it to the industrial age or industrial economy. Well, actually, I think Max Weber, paraphrasing, said that the Protestant work ethic is the work one does on earth is the work that one does improving his nation of domicile is God's work on earth, and that gives you the sense of duty, right? But I mean, even people, when he published that at the end of the 19th century, early 20th, but even agriculturalists, from the agriculturalists would have felt happy with that, because after all, even a farmer is improving his nation, and therefore felt it was God's. So what is it you feel about an information age that's kind of released one from that duty or obligation? Because surely many of these people would feel that they are doing work to improve their nation. I would trust they are.
Yes.
Well, we totally divorced ourselves from that Protestant work ethic.
Yeah. Well, that's also an interesting point, and the way I would put it is that the Protestant ethic is linked to the spirit of capitalism in the way that I described, but it also has other dimensions, and probably this dimension can continue. It's also partly a more religious dimension. But this point about Lawrence and the deadly sins and then technology. I think it's important to kind of see that technology is always, and its impacts always come through some specific culture, and so it is our culture that kind of results in these work-centered impacts, and not technology in itself. So for me, my favorite tribe is the Yiri-Yorons in northern Australia, because in the 1930s the Western missionaries went there, and until then they had used old stone axes to get their food, and almost all of their time went to getting that food. And then the missionaries brought steel axes, and they could get the same food in something like a few hours a day work. And whereas we in the West have always used the saved time to build even better axes, the Yiri-Yorons started to sleep longer. And I think that there is some kind of determinist way of thinking about technology in the West that is actually not based on how things ultimately are.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether there isn't whether the Protestant ethic division between creativity and work doesn't have some kind of natural substance to it. And I guess I have two related questions. One is, don't you think that there are some types of labor that would be difficult to transform into creative labor? And the other question is, I'm concerned as an artist that the attempt to transform all labor into creative labor will actually leach away time and resources from the production of art as art.
Yes. First, my argument is not that everyone is becoming a creative worker. I think it's limited. If it's currently in more than 1/3, I don't know how much more it can actually be. But still, the point about the Protestant ethic was neither that it was the ethic of everyone in the industrial capitalism. It was just a dominant ethic, and dominant in the sense that it was the ethic of the group that was kind of leading the development. And in this sense only I talk about the hacker ethic. So I would totally agree with anyone saying that not everyone can be creative.
There's a natural ceiling on the percentage of data that can be transformed.
Yeah, and I'm not only talking about kind of that not everyone is creative as a person. I'm not actually saying that, but also in our economy we need a lot of routine work still. And then about the artistic side, I wouldn't be worried about the role of art. I think that this creativity that we will see in the working life is much too pragmatic to ever kind of take space from real artistic work.
I don't know. I was a young New Yorker during the internet boom and bust, and I knew so many people who, if the internet hadn't come along and given them creative jobs, would have been painting the studio somewhere, recording music, or traveling around the world, learning some kind of artistic skill. And instead we were sitting around doing Photoshop or writing crappy research reports about the future of the consumer internet or something like that. And it seems to me that a lot of, just in terms of people hours and creative resources, there was a lot of leaching over of potential aesthetic capacity into the work world.
Yeah, perhaps they weren't then real artists. I think that artists and everyone is kind of tested with temptations, and if you give yourself to Photoshop, you have lost your soul.
I must say that I was trying on the technical level. I was trying to have a note of presentation for something else for Pekka. About the economic importance and the business importance of other cultural activities such as art and philosophy. And he sent me a furious email. I will always object to make philosophy an industry.
But I was wondering what you would do with the kind of argument that says that what we've seen happen with the internet, with computers over the last 20 years, is the development and maturing of an industry, such that when there were a whole bunch of different players in it that's all shaken out to a great degree, the industry is now dominated by Microsoft, who, by and large, has its competitive advantage in discouraging innovation, and that the innovative alternatives that are out there, or that most people like to point to, like Apple Computer, like the Linux operating system, and even Unix, which is now in a big fight with IBM, that these guys are by and large losing the innovative struggles to Microsoft, because Microsoft really has such a capacity to control the level of innovation in the industry as a whole.
Yeah, it's probably true to some extent, and still I think that the Microsoft situation is only a very small part of the technology field. There's a lot of other things and a lot of innovation happening in Silicon Valley and other places than the desktop operating system or the desktop office applications. But I also think that it's not totally true that there's no creativity at Microsoft.
People who make this argument wouldn't make it necessarily just about the internet or computer technology industry. They'd make it about essentially every industry.
Yeah.
These industries go through these creative blossoming periods. They then kind of mature and get to a point where they usually then begin to lose out to competitors, and there's a big shakeout. Eventually, maybe a whole new industry will come in, and we don't have industries for typewriters anymore, for example.
Yeah. Well, this leads to the point that I think there is always a role for kind of the public
guidance of the market in the sense that if we are in an innovation economy, it's important that we don't let things to become too closed, because innovation requires an open environment for innovation, and if we let some companies who own a position with some dubious means where they are actually blocking the kind of collective process of innovation, then we are not doing a good enough job as governments. I think that globally this is a very big issue, that are we actually closing off information too much in the West, so that we block the release of the larger potential of the world's population, because currently information doesn't flow to most of the world, and most of the world cannot really enter this innovative economy. So I think that there is a big global ethical issue related to closing of information.
But not only that, in terms of the innovation, I wouldn't say that Microsoft is secure in its dominant position, even in the operating systems, where Linux is making extraordinary progress. And more governments from the world are adopting Linux. The European Union just issued a directive adopting Linux over Microsoft. That's the case of Brazil, that's the case of China, that's the case of France, that's the case of Germany. And of course, it's the case of major corporations such as IBM, which are betting completely on open source development and abandoning the entire logic of Microsoft. Most people at this point would say that Microsoft is having still a monopoly situation in the PCs, but the PC is an almost extinguished species in the very near future, and they are using the resources to try to migrate to some other monopoly situation, which is what they actually do best, to take other people's technology and make it into a monopoly, the Japanese corporation of the American world. So at least I would say the jury is out on the issue if Microsoft was able to eliminate other companies like Netscape, etc. Is Microsoft really able to compete successfully over the next 10 years with a Linux-wide network based on a completely different philosophy and software architecture? The jury is out. I think,
yeah, I wonder if you could help and expand the connection between information and this model. And what you describe applies particularly to Linux. And I can imagine him in front of his console and creating code and working with information in a way that fits perfectly this hacker model. There are many people who work with information who don't fit as well. The average bank teller, for example, has very innovative work in their life. They don't really depend on a network of colleagues to create anything, and they have no flexibility in their time. So working with innovation, with information, and with computers is not the definition of network. In the same way as Larry would say, Da Vinci was a hacker, and he worked with innovation, with information, without computers.
Yeah.
So, is there something about information and something about how information is used that's essential for this model? Could you be a hacker with manufacturing or with making things, craft, or what exactly is that connection?
Yeah. Well,
I really would emphasize this point. I mean, I think you are very solid in my reading of your work when you are analyzing Linux and internet development and information technology. The very interesting argument that you make that, for instance, hackerism, social hackerism, how to reform the welfare state and hackerism in all domains. I think it's a very interesting argument. But of course, you are migrating an argument from a solid terrain where it has been historically proven in terms of the number of experiences to the entire society, and there things are more complicated.
Yes. Well, that's an important question. I would say that starting with the bank teller, that is probably not a creative work. So it's not information as such, because almost everything is information, but it is what is done with the information. It is just routine processing of information. It's not or creative work, and it's not part of this creative class or the hacker ethic idea. But if you use information to create something new, you are creating some new information that can be to be creative, at least in a small sense. For example, in addition to being a programmer, you are as a journalist writing an article. That's clearly creative work, or a photographer, and so on. And it's the fact that this kind of work is increasing and becoming the dominant group in the economy that I link it to the information age, and computer as such is not a criterion that is enough to distinguish things.
Okay.
Briefly, you just thinking on a small point that maybe wasn't quite, but you said that a third of the people that work is really creative, but are they the third with the most ability to effectively with power, with access to resources and questions like that? You might say that being a CEO and running a large company is creative. You might say that other parts of information work running that is more working out a series of heuristics in order to optimize shareholder value, and it's not necessarily falls under the rubric of creative. Yet these are people. This is an area with a lot of influence and seen in the network, in the information economy.
Well,
just an idea.
Yeah. Well, I think that to be included in my concept of the creative or creative work, there has to be some degree of real creative input in the process, but it can be smaller in some jobs than in some others, and still it makes sense to talk about them all having the hacker ethic, although this question of power is also important, because the way I formulate my argument is that the important thing is that it is the dominant group, so it is the group that is having the biggest impact or most power in our economy. So in this sense there is this power aspect, but I don't think it goes so directly to the management and the workers distinction.
I have a comment and a question. And the comment is that first, I think that we discussed earlier, the sustainability question perceivably is different at first glance. Is the opposite to the hacker ethic of creativity, and so many people tend to think that it is impossible to sustain creativity, which is in itself probably an impossible phrase even. But I want to put a comment is the information technology, the starting point of the empirical work about Linux itself has been the industry that has been never seen, even in which human historical period. So the Moore's law, no debate around this, but this is a empirical fact that we have been observing and we have to live with probably in the future, and of course in a few decades. So the task of developing analytical framework to understand this phenomenon is, I think, is in itself a very essential part and very important contribution. And
I can see this as a beginning of a very interesting engagement of the whole real science discipline trying to understand this phenomenon. And my question is, now that we want to develop intellectual tools or intellectual instruments to understand the sustainability of creativity, and this goes back to the instruments and ethic dimension, is that, okay, we have artists who are creative, we have information workers who work on software. How about other people? Maybe we go back to Peter's point about Microsoft. They are very innovative in, maybe not most innovative in terms of creating new software, new systems, but very creative in creating ways to discourage other people, to maintain. Probably that's one way of applying the creativity. Another way of applying creativity would be, I would say, just lawyers trying to defend, no matter, even if, especially the American image of lawyers. That's another way of applying creativity, even you have ethical problems. Or even we talk about maybe today what's the so-called terrorism. That's another way of trying to find new ways to attack the convoys in Iraq. I'm just pointing this out that probably this is another dimension of this. Before I can see it invaluable to develop such an intellectual framework to understand this network and hacker and sustain creativity. But how about the application? If we are putting this together into something we've never seen before, can this tool be used by a future Microsoft, or have you think about put a thought around it before?
Yeah, well, very interesting. But for me, the concept of creativity or innovativeness here is not a normative one. So you can be creative in discouraging too. I don't, or myself, view that highly, but still it is creativity and innovativeness that we are seeing in our economy. So I think that the analytical and normative question must be separated. So I think that the concept of the hacker ethic raises many ethically problematic questions to our time. One of them is linked to this, but there are many others, like if there is a creative class and then the other workers, for example, is it creating a very divided society, and a new divided society, and so on. So with the concept of that describes what is happening, or tries to describe what is happening, the political and ethical questions still remain.
I've got one question in sort of a long stream of issues that I enjoyed the talk very much. I wanted to know the degree to which your issues about time you think are determined by the technology as opposed to other elements in society. For example, there's a fair amount of research in virtual organizations and telecommuting that says that people can use the technology to create the kind of environment that you feel is being lost, where you get more time with family because it's project-based and it's getting the work done. It's not how many hours you put in. A lot of that work has been done by the Department of Labor. They fund most of these studies. And an awful lot of them are done in government organizations. Now, that suggests to me that there may be an interesting issue that says that some of the time problems have less to do with the technology than they have to do with the short-term profit characteristics, particularly very industrial industrialized countries in terms of maximizing shareholder value, not having enough workers and creating sort of a different notion of a 24/7 work environment than it has to do with the technology itself. In other words, the technology could be enabling a better kind of life as opposed to the more oppressive life that you described.
I totally agree that it's not technology in itself, but it's our cultural relationship to technology. And one of the key elements is that we are so, in addition to being so work-centered, we are so money-centered. So this kind of drives us to optimize our time more and more, and then it has these impacts on our leisure time too that I described.
Well, Pekka, you have convinced us. Enough hackeries, let's go back to work.